as you can imagine, there's a lot that I wish I knew before driving for Uber and driving for Lyft. So in this video, I'm going to talk about the 5 biggest errors that beginners make when starting rideshare driving. Number 1, not signing up with both apps. This is the biggest one on this list by far. So I want to kick it off here because I've met some beginning drivers who don't do this, but I've even met some experienced drivers who've been driving for 5 years and they're like, oh, I only drive for Uber, I don't even touch Lyft. Make sure you sign up with both. 1, it's free, so enough said. And 2, you don't have to have like a minimum quota for either app. The reason why I say this is because on some weekends, Uber may have a great bonus. On another weekend, Lyft may have a bonus that Uber doesn't have. Or, and even better, let's say on a given weekend, let's say it's a big weekend in your area, both apps may have bonuses, and you can get both bonuses. In addition, sometimes one will pay more than the other. It really depends. Like when I first started driving, I remember Lyft was paying more. And I was like, oh, I'm going to stick with Lyft. Then I was like, you know what? I might as well try Uber. Why not try it out? Uber then started paying more than Lyft. So I only drove for Uber. Then I went back to Lyft. So you can go back and forth even on a random weekend. Like say on a Friday, Uber's paying more. And then on a Saturday, Lyft's paying more. Always sign up with both. Another thing is you can kind of get the benefits of being between them. I've mentioned this story before, but I remember in Boston on St. Patrick's Day, Uber texted me saying, hey, minimum hourly guarantee, we're going to give you $25 an hour on St. Patrick's Day. Then Lyft texted me and said, hey, we're going to actually do a minimum hourly guarantee. We're going to do $30 an hour. Then Uber texted me back maybe 5 minutes later and said, hey, we changed our mind. We're going to bump it up to $35 an hour. And they were bidding or outbidding each other. And guess who wins in that bidding war? You do. And in case you're curious, as a side note, I believe it was Uber that won that bidding war. This was in like 2015 or 16. And it was 45 minimum hourly guarantee. And I remember being like, wow, if I just stuck with Lyft, I would have only made 35 or 40 an hour if I only signed up with that app. But by signing up with both, I was able to make more money and be guaranteed minimum 45 an hour. Number 2, not checking. What I mean by this is, as you can imagine, every city is different. Your location is the number one factor that determines how much money you can make. Every city has a different layout, a different structure, and I've met some drivers who say, oh, I just drive kind of whenever I want. Sometimes I make a lot of money, sometimes I don't. That is the biggest thing to not do. What I mean is make sure every single time you drive, especially in the beginning, look at your analytics and track. This is what I did, and I realized when the best time to drive is and when the worst time. Now, obviously, Friday and Saturday nights, huge peak hours, morning and evening commutes, definitely peak hours as well. However, I remember in Boston, 7 to 9 a.m. was really the best time to drive. I've met other drivers who say, actually, in my city, the peak hours in the morning start around 6 a.m. and end around 10 a.m. So you have a 4-hour window, double that of Boston, compared to before when, for me, if I drove during, like, say, 6 a.m. in Boston, not going to be the best. Now, I wouldn't know this, whether it's either situation, unless I track it and I'm checking and I'm looking at the analytics to see when the best time to drive is. I did a video talking about the number one way to make the most amount of money driving, and that is analytics. Track every time. For example, in Boston, I noticed that during the morning commute, 7 to 9 a.m., I could really only get one really high-paying ride. Usually, it was around like between 8 and 9 a.m. And I realized I was actually better off waiting till about 8:20 a.m. So let's say it's 8 a.m., I turn the app off. Wait till about 8:20, turn it back on, because so many people were ordering Ubers and Lyfts during that time, the surges were way higher. So it's actually better off just waiting 20 minutes, almost not working, honestly, just maybe reading a book or just relaxing, turning it on at 8:20 because I'd make significantly more money. Because around 8 to 9 a.m., I could really only do one ride from the residential area of Boston to the actual working area of Boston, if that makes sense. But I wouldn't know that if I didn't check the analytics. Make sure you check, because I promise you, although it sounds kind of weird, the more you track and figure out when the best and worst time to drive is, the more you can make more money. Number 3, not starting off part-time. This is huge because there's so many different factors that determine how much money you can make as a driver. And as you can imagine, some cities, and I've said this a billion times on this channel, some cities pay more or less compared to other cities. In addition, depending on your schedule, maybe the hours you can drive in are super lucrative. Maybe the hours you can drive in, though, are maybe not lucrative and the exact opposite. In some cases, driving is 100% worth it. In other cases, it's not. And you don't know until you start driving part-time. In addition, I remember when I started driving in Boston, the second I went from part-time to full-time, I ended up hating it. Now, granted, when it comes to driving full-time, some drivers love it, some drivers hate it. It's a love-hate relationship. But the biggest thing is to not jump into it, putting all your eggs in one basket, going into it full-time. Start off part-time and test the waters out. You may start driving and you're like, you know what? I really like this, I'm making good money, maybe I will then transition to full-time. However, you could start off driving part-time and say, you know what? I don't think I like this. There's a lot to this, I'm not making that much money, there's a lot of cons to it, maybe it's just not for me. Make sure you start off part-time, because the last thing you want to do is try doing it full-time, you realize, oh wow, I don't like this at all, I'm not making that much money, but now you're in this weird predicament where you're like, wait, I'm relying on this income because I don't have other income coming in as if I did it part-time. Number 4, not having rideshare insurance. Just get it. Obviously, you should already have auto insurance. Rideshare insurance is going to bump up your amount when it comes to your insurance a little bit, but it is well worth it. The last thing you want to do is get into an accident and you start talking to your auto insurance. You say, hey, yeah, I was driving for Uber, and they're like, wait, we didn't know you're doing rideshare driving. We're not going to cover you. Insurance companies will use any excuse they can to not cover you. Kind of sucks to say, but it's just the truth. This is something to keep in mind. The extra amount you're going to spend when it comes to rideshare insurance is well worth it. Just make sure you're covered. Because unfortunately, just numbers and statistics, the more you drive, the more likely you are to get into an accident. Whether it's your fault or someone else's, just make sure you have rideshare insurance. Number 5, not having a dash cam. This is very similar to not having rideshare insurance, where hopefully you will never have to use rideshare insurance. Hopefully you will never have to use that dash cam footage, but it's there just in case you need it. If you check Amazon, I've seen some dash cams for like 20 or 30 bucks even. Obviously there's a spectrum. I've seen some as cheap as 20 or 30. There's some dash cams that are like 200 bucks, but even still, that amount is well worth it. And the big thing about dash cams that some people know, some people don't, but in case you don't, when it comes to dash cams, for most of them are the good ones. They film in front of your car, of course, but also inside of your car. So make sure you get a dual filming one, that's the right term, because unfortunately, to say, there have been some incidents where, let's say, somebody attacks an Uber Lyft driver. Remember, these are very far and few between. And I think a bigger thing is, let's say there's a big dispute. I've seen so many videos, we've probably seen these as well, that go viral online, of somebody, let's say, stealing the tip jar from an Uber driver. Or somebody, I don't know, there's an incident where someone coughed on the Uber driver, and it turned into this he said versus she said situation, and the driver actually had the footage. So by having the footage of what happened, whether it is an accident and something, like, say, outside of your vehicle, let's say some kind of dispute or incident that happens inside of your vehicle, you have the dash cam footage to prove your side of the story. And now, a bonus error that beginner drivers make, not having a phone mount. This for me is the most frustrating out of all of these, actually. A lot of these I can kind of see if you just started driving, like not signing up with both apps, not even knowing about rideshare insurance, etc., etc. This is the biggest one because I feel like everybody uses their GPS on their phone now. So even if you're not doing rideshare driving, it makes no sense. And I've seen some of my friends do this. I've been in Ubers and Lyfts when it comes to drivers, where they have their phone like down here and they're doing like this like head bob thing while trying to look at their GPS. It's in their hand, so they're like driving with, one hand on the wheel. Just get the phone mount. You can get one on Amazon for like $10. I've even seen some at the dollar store for, of course, $1. Just go to Dollar Tree or to the 99-cent store. Wherever you can go, just get a phone mount, because having it secure, one, is way less of a hassle. It's right there. You can easily, look at the GPS, see the app if you need to control music. But two, it is significantly safer just having it and not having to do this while driving.